I have always been here.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Ambassadorial Wing. And I know this is an earlier stream than I normally do, but got something very special for y'all this morning. And wherever you are, whether it's morning, afternoon, or night, welcome and thank you all for being here. And today, we've got a first for the Ambassadorial Wing. I have got very special guests with me today. Some of you may know him, some of you may not. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Phil Hawkins, the director of the fan film Star Wars Origins. And Phil, welcome to the Ambassadorial Wing, and thank you for joining me today.
No, thanks for having me. And sorry it's so early because obviously I'm over in the UK, as you can probably tell by my accent. So it works out well.
Believe it or not, I have worked with a lot of people from over in your neck of the woods, so this is nothing unusual for me. I'm used to being up early, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, so this is not uncommon. This is just normally earlier than I usually go live, but this was an opportunity that I could not pass up because we were talking before we went live and I saw your fan film and I was like, this is brilliant. This is absolutely positively brilliant. I mean, most everybody who follows me on social media, who is a subscriber to my channel, knows I am a huge mega Star Wars fan. Mm-hmm. And fan films are something that I think are a really great expression of that sort of fandom. And yours is actually, I think, was a very intriguing concept. And honestly, it was a thrill to watch. It was imaginative. It was creative. It really drew from the inspiration of both the minds of Lucas and Spielberg. And that was something that I loved. I really did and everything.
Thank you. That's very, very kind.
Well, as I say to a lot of my guests, I don't blow smoke. If I say something is good, if I say somebody has done a good job, I mean it. Mm-hmm. And you and the people that you worked with on this film, you really poured your love and your passion into that. And I thought we'd just take a little time today, talk about the film, talk about who your inspirations are and everything as a filmmaker, and just talk about why you love this universe so much.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, deep dive. Here we go. Thank you. I mean, I suppose the first thing which you spoke about then, and maybe before the call, was the fact that we just tried to do something unique because there's a lot of fan films out there. There's fan films uploaded nearly every day, it seems, and that's wonderful. It's a great proving ground for filmmakers or just for fans, to kind of they've got an itch, a favorite character, a story, a question, what happened between this and that event, and people go out and make films, which is great. But for me, I just didn't want to fill a gap, I wanted to do something that was kind of unique and interesting from a narrative perspective, like make people guess why this is a Star Wars film. Some people love it, some people hate it. You can tell there's some of the YouTube comments of people that, in the first minute you start seeing some trucks and people go, this is, crap, and then leave a comment and say otherwise. But it's a film that you have to invest in because you miss out. It starts small and ends huge. And I don't know, I don't know whether we're going to avoid spoilers or get into a spoiler discussion. That's totally up to you. But yeah, it gives it to you if you give it the time, right? So,
yeah. Well, the interesting thing about this was, as you said, it starts small and it ends massive. And I think, honestly, for me, what intrigued me was I could kind of see the threads of what you were doing. And I was like, okay, I'm invested. This is 20. I'm going to give this film the 20 minutes that it's asking of me. And if you can do that with whether it's a hardcore fan like myself or someone who's just a fan of who enjoys independent films, fan films, or whatever the case may be, then you've got a win right there. And just very quickly to the chat, Classic Comics, good morning. Thank you for tuning in, bud. Yeah, Classic and everything. He said he actually I recommended this to all my friends and everything. Classic is someone I've worked with. I consider him a friend. And he's like, I saw the film about 2 weeks ago. Very clever blending of these two concepts together. Yeah, and well, we kind of touched on this a little bit. You drew influences both from Spielberg in particular with the Indiana Jones aesthetic and obviously from Lucas with the Star Wars aesthetic. And you take me through that walk us through that process a little bit. Where did you, how were you able to meld those two things so cohesively? Because you really did a good job on that aspect.
Thank you. I mean, I wish I had some, kind of complicated answer for you, but I think it's just in my DNA. I think I know in my soul what a Indiana Jones film feels like, what a Star Wars film feels like, and that's not to say like what something looks like and what something feels like are different things, right? Because we haven't made like a shot-for-shot remake of Star Wars, right? Or Indiana Jones, but it has that feel or aesthetic, that to it that is. I grew up in these movies, right? They're the movies that made me want to become a filmmaker, and that's why I made this film, was to kind of show what we could do. That's kind of on a personal level. I think on a practical level, it's shot in the Sahara Desert, right? It's shot in that heat. It's shot exposed in those environments. There's no green screen. Everyone's sweating and real. It feels very gritty and cinematic in that way. And the lenses I used are kind of old anamorphic lenses that have that. They're not as crisp and as sharp and as House of Cards and Netflix would be, or something. They're not. They're not that kind of thing, and that gives it a that timeless quality, right? It feels like it's kind of shot on film. So that's all kind of part of it in that way.
Yeah, and I could honestly see that in as I was watching it, because it had. You could tell that you were out there in the environment. You were out there in the middle of the Sahara Desert. And I think for myself, honestly, you say you don't have a big complicated answer, and honestly, that's okay. There's an old acronym that you probably know: KISS, keep it simple. Stupid. Obviously, you're not stupid, but you don't need a big, as long as you have the fundamentals of what you're wanting to do, of being a filmmaker, you don't need some big complicated process. If you can keep it simple, you can explain it simply, then your audience is going to be able to connect with what you're doing. And honestly, for me at least, and everything, I went through a lot of the comments on the film, and a lot of people were like, "You had something here. You caught the spirit of both these universes, of Indiana Jones and of Star Wars, and you melded it so well together." And I love the fact that you didn't just focus on one aspect of the Star Wars universe. You paid attention, you paid homage to all three eras, the prequels, the originals, and the sequel trilogy, and even a little bit of the expanded universe, which I personally, I'm a fan of the expanded universe. And the really interesting thing for me was watching this. I caught all the little winks and nods that you put in there with the dialogue and with the character names and with the props and so on. But for me, it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel non-organic to what you were doing. And I think, honestly, what you were able to do was, obviously, yes, this was a fan film, but it had that professional feel to it. Like you said, you used the particular lenses to really grasp what Lucas and Spielberg had done in their earlier work. And it was a love letter. That's how I kind of looked at this film and everything. It was a love letter.
It is.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it is. No, it is a love letter, and that's what it is. I mean, I don't know how spoiler free you want to be. Should we say now, like, go watch the film? Because I feel like we sort of need to talk about why it is that. So,
I know some people have watched this, and we can go into some mild spoilers. We don't have to go spoiler deep, and we don't have to completely spoil the thing. But I think for something like this, even if you do spoilers, there's still the incentive to go see a film.
I'll try not to spoil the detail, but I mean, essentially, the characters are connected to George Lucas, and that's why the film is set on Earth, and that's kind of why it becomes the origins of Star Wars. I think what throws people is that it opens and we're in World War II. And it says very specifically Northern Africa, and people think, hang on, didn't all that happen a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away? And you're like, well, yes, that's the point. It did.
Yes. Yeah, it did. Exactly. Because
what if there was evidence of that here, and what if that did actually happen? What if George Lucas is trying to say based on a true story, and how did he find that out? What was his experience of that? And when you boil that down into, well, someone has to dig this up, you go, well, actually, it's both Indiana Jones and Star Wars melded together, because narratively it worked. It's not as if you're just trying to throw them together because it's like there's that comic, right? I wish I remember the issue number, but there's a comic that did Indiana Jones discovering the Millennium Falcon. And there was a kind of a thing. It was like a fun, what if kind of comic, and then end up being that Sasquatch was Chewbacca. It's kind of, which is kind of fun. But like, that's too far, right? That's two characters existing. It's like, well, what if they all happened? They did all exist, and because Star Wars is about myth and legend, and that feeds into. And not to get into a Last Jedi debate, but what it means to be a legend, in terms of Skywalker and Luke Skywalker and that kind of thing.
Yes.
So, and the inspiration of George Lucas going to like samurai movies and the kind of idea of mythic narrative, it all feeds into what Indiana Jones and Star Wars is all about, like in its kind of DNA. And that's what the film is exploring. So, and fans like yourself, you say you watch the first, couple of shots and go, okay, I see where we're going here, or I'm intrigued at how this all combines together. Whereas some people just like a fan film to be a lightsaber fight, and that's fine. But as a filmmaker, they don't really interest me, because after a minute or two of someone flipping around the woods fighting each other, I'm like, where's the story? Where's the character? Where's the emotion?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and Classic Comics got a question here and everything. I'll bring this up and everything. How'd you manage to get the tanks?
Well, the tanks are actually from the Moroccan military. So they're Moroccan military tanks. And they were part of the film and helped us with the jeeps and the tanks and filming those kind of inhospitable places, and were really kind of part of the production, and also supervised. We got real firing machine gun weapons in the film, and Morocco is a very, very, very strict country for kind of gun law and regulation. So we had to have army supervision using those period weapons, and and that side of things. So it was a great collaboration between us and the Moroccan government and the Moroccan military to kind of put all this together. So, you say it's a fan film, but like it's the scale of like a feature film, but it is shot in a small amount of time.
Yeah. Well, and you hit upon something very interesting just a minute ago when you were talking about this very much delves into the mythos of the Star Wars universe. And obviously for George Lucas, when he was doing his film school education and everything at USC, and he went off after he got done with that, and he went off and he started delving into the different mythologies from around the world, and he kind of incorporated bits and pieces of those mythologies into his universe, and you really hit upon it. This is delving into the mythology of the Star Wars universe, because for us, looking at this as an outsider, this would be a myth. Mm-hmm. Everything. And what Lucas really did was he created a modern myth. But what he did was he pulled from our own real world mythology to blend this together in a way that people would understand. Because I think a lot of people would agree that truly, at this point, Star Wars is part of pop culture mythology. If not, maybe thousands of years in the future, they'll look back at this and say, why did they spend so much time creating these myths of this young guy, of this family called the Skywalkers?
Hey, we'll be still making movies in thousands of years based on Star Wars, so it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it's true what you say. There's something ingrained in us, as Lucas speaks a lot about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and what that means for us psychologically as storytellers and people that receive story. There's a reason why we're entertained by story and the way stories are told, and obviously George is very, very clever at, as you say, combining all of these things that were familiar to us, like thinking about how kind of Buddhism and meditation and that side of it, and then applying that to kind of what the Force might be, and little bits of religion pieced together with mythology, and how do we know about the mythology of like the Greeks, for example, or ancient Greece, or going back even further, is from stories, architectural record, all this kind of stuff, which feeds into the whole Indiana Jones thing. So, if we discovered a Star Destroyer, or a lightsaber or whatever, buried in the ocean, suddenly our perspective on the world would change instantly. And that's what was interesting for me, was like, what's the worst and best time for characters to discover that this is real? It's true, all of it. I can't do a good Harrison Ford impression, but like
it works.
And that would be during World War II, right? When the Nazis did have a division that was kind of darkly trying to look at the supernatural and various forces to kind of prove their roots in a twisted way. But like, what if they got their hands on a lightsaber? What they got hands on, this technology during World War II? Like, it would change everything. Yeah. So, and that's fascinating for me, is like combining those things, and just having tanks fire at a Star Destroyer is just kind of a cool, very poppy but interesting melding of worlds.
Yes.
So it's kind of fun.
Well, and the interesting thing about what you did with this film was you rooted this in the Indiana Jones universe, because with some of the dialogue and everything that was used, and obviously you had your male lead and everything, Walt. Very much dressed in that Indiana Jones aesthetic and everything. His attire and everything very much harkened back, obviously, with the fedora and the white pullover shirt, and then the khaki trousers and everything. And you've got Ellie. But their dynamic was very intriguing in this film and everything, because obviously they're the focal point. Because they're the two archaeologists working on this dig. I mean, if you look at this, this is a archaeological dig, but it's an archaeological dig that deals with Star Wars. And the thing that I loved is you never put in people's faces, oh, this is with how you described the artifact. And you always kept a little bit, you're always wondering, what's this artifact? And then when you finally see it, it's the Skywalker lightsaber. And you're like, that's a nice little twist there, because it could have been any number of things. It could have been the Skywalker lightsaber. It could have been Han Solo's blaster. It could have been just an Imperial blaster. It could have been Vader's helmet, for heaven's sake. It could have been any number of things. And then, of course, you had the reveal that they have unearthed unintentionally an Imperial class Star Destroyer. And the amazing thing was, the tension kept getting ramped up. It was built up throughout the story. And obviously you've got the one character named Akbar, who is another wink and nod, but very clever, very well done and everything. I had to go back and rewatch it with subtitles and everything, because I couldn't quite catch all the dialogue. And that was on my end and everything. It wasn't anything, that's a fault in the film. But when Walt says to Elliot towards the end, instead of calling him Walter, why don't we call him George? And I was like, this is an origin story of obviously where George Lucas might have gotten all his ideas. And the fact that you set this during World War II, another thing that Steven Spielberg has been well known for. And because he grew up in the years after and everything, his family, I think it was his father who was in the U.S. military during World War II and everything. I'd have to go back and do some research on that to double check it. But saying this during possibly one of the worst times in the history of the world, but that sense of hope and everything, which has been very much a cornerstone of both directors' film styles, the messages and the themes that they have very much latched onto, is that sense of hope during dire times. And you really were able to encapsulate that within this film.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was, so, it is seemingly the hope, and that's what comes through. Ellie has a speech that says, basically, you not see what's happening. Like this would stop us all fighting ourselves and make us see that we're part of something bigger. And Akbar says at the very beginning as well, but you don't quite know what he's talking about. The idea that the secret is out now, or now is the time for the secret to be out, which is what puts him at odds, with his nephew, who does him in. But it's and that's obviously like harking back to parts of the mythology of Star Wars itself, and family relationships and father figures and mentors and that kind of thing. So it was kind of a nod to that as well. But yeah, I mean, that's what it does. It represents the hope, and it also represents if you're left, because if you think about the film, she's left with nothing. Right? All that exists actually by the end of the film is a certain thing, and everything else is gone. Trying to be, I mean, we sort of spoil things, but trying to be spoil like so. Yeah. So if you don't have the proof, particularly, then how do you tell these stories? And the fact that I love the idea of a little George Lucas's bedtime stories are kind of like, tell me again what happened, tell me what happened, and these kind of feed into the stories that we know now, and again mythology and into our own kind of popular culture, that even people that haven't seen Star Wars and shock horror, there are people out there that haven't, still know who Darth Vader is, still know what a lightsaber is, still and that is myth, right? That is legend. Yes. And not just from film. So it's kind of fun to play with that.
Well, and the interesting thing is, there's something very inherent within our human nature to want to know how things began, how things started, where did all of this come from? And not to get like uber religious or anything, or what have you, but something that the Christian community, which I'm a part of, I'm a Christian, we always pay more attention to like the first 11 books of the Bible. But looking at it from a different perspective, in particular with the Jewish community, with Jewish people, they focus more on from chapters 12 through 50 of Genesis. To them, the first 11 books don't matter as much. It does matter to them, but for them, the Abrahamic narrative is more important. But it all comes back to one thing: where did we all come from? Mm-hmm. And picking the title that you did, Star Wars Origins, it was an interesting twist because you go in expecting, oh, this is going to be like a film about the formation of the Republic or the foundation of the Jedi. But instead, it's telling a hypothetical story, but a very interesting what-if story of where did George Lucas get the inspiration for everything that he did. And it's very much ingrained in our ingrained in our DNA, if in a manner of speaking, to want to know, where did all of this come from? Where is the wellspring? Where is the source for the stories that we have made a part of our lives? And what you did with this film was kind of answer that question, but at the same time, it didn't spoil everything, because you still got gaps and everything that could still be filled in, because obviously by the end of the film, as you kind of mentioned, Ellie's left with George and the artifact, and Walt zooms off to heaven only knows where. So, but I think one thing that this film does is it gives the Star Wars community as a whole something to latch onto, because right now there is some division within the fandom and everything, unfortunately, and that is a sad state of the fact. But what you were able to do with this film is, I think you have given the entire community an opportunity to gather around something and say, this is something we can latch onto, that I think universally, or as a fandom as a whole, can connect with, and we can discuss, and we can appreciate.
I'm glad, because it's very sad. I find the whole division of Star Wars fandom frustrating,
same.
and a little boring, to be very honest.
I agree.
It's okay if you don't like something. You don't need to keep going on about it. You don't define your being by not liking something. It's not a very positive outlook on life. Sure, there's things I don't like, about films or Star Wars or life, but you don't see me going on about them and arguing and threatening people. All this kind of horrible side of Star Wars, which for something that brings so much hope and joy, to then have this, I guess it's yin and yang, right? With such hope and joy and passion. There are some people that feel cheated and neglected, and I think, and I understand that, but it's like, that's okay. Just stop watching it. It's fine, And it's been lovely actually to make something that I know different sides, as you say, different sides of the Star Wars community have embraced for different ways. And I know there's a few contentious shots or imagery that I've included in the film for some people, and you know what? It just makes me feel really sad. The few people that are like, oh, you included that, I'm not watching anymore. I'm like, well, you're lost, because this is a celebration of all of Star Wars. As you say, there's every single trilogy in there. There's the animated series is part of the extended universe. And like, if you pause it on a certain shot, you'll be able to find and hit 4K. You'll be able to find so much stuff in there, and that's important to me. And whether it's like, oh, George Lucas didn't come up with that or not, like, it doesn't matter. It's a celebration of Star Wars as a whole, as a feeling, as culture, as popular culture, and not just about divisions. Like if it had not included something or included something else, because I agreed or disagreed, that's not what the film is about. As you said before, the film is a love letter to George Lucas and Spielberg and the action adventure genre, because there's also Back to the Future in there. There's also Jurassic Park in there. There's lots of other movies that are in that. Stargate obviously, is an influence there as well. So it's not just that; it's a celebration of this style of film. So it would have been wrong to kind of put a line in the sand and go, well, I'm not going to talk about that stuff, but I'm going to talk about this stuff. And some people like that, some people don't, and that's fine. But I'm not interested in hearing, why you hate me for it. I'm just like, I've got better things to do than listen to people rant on the internet about why I included something or not. It's just, it's funny.
Well, and most people who follow me know I'm not a huge fan of the sequel trilogy, but I'm not going to berate somebody who does. And as you mentioned, you included everything. You included iconography and imagery from all three from the entire Star Wars universe. And I look at that and I say, these particular characters I did not connect with, but others did. And the fascinating thing for me was, even though you included icons or characters from the sequels, it didn't ruin my enjoyment, because I look at this, it's all Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
It's all Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something else that you mentioned. This is also a love letter to the action adventure genre of films. And that's something that has been a part of the pop culture landscape since its inception, quite literally. Because you've got the old 1930s serials, which were an inspiration for Lucas and for Spielberg. Mm-hmm. And honestly, the thing for me was, I grew up in the 1980s, and action adventure films were a huge part of that landscape. And it's something, it's a genre that I love to this day. And people say, well, you can't tell a lot of very interesting stories with action adventure. I respectfully disagree. And
100%.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, what you and other creatives have done is you have added your own voice to this universe. It may not be canon, but you're still adding your voice to the Star Wars universe. Because if you think about it, even something as old as The Lord of the Rings, people still are adding their voice to it. They're writing fan fictions, they're adding stories to this broader universe. And what you and other creatives, filmmakers, authors, artists, sculptors, whatever the case may be, they're adding their voice. They're paying respect and to the universe that George Lucas created. And I think for him, I think that for one thing, the fact that other people have been inspired by what he did, I would think he would probably say, if I ever had the opportunity to ask him, what do you feel? How do you feel about people who have been inspired by what you did? And I think this is a hypothetical again. I think he would probably say that's great, because
you don't have to be hypothetical about it, because he is very supportive of filmmakers, and in his tenure, whatever you want to call it, when he ran Lucasfilm, he allowed fan films to exist, right? For that reason, he actively, the fan film awards and that kind of stuff, he actively encouraged people to go and make films and dabble in the universe. And that's huge. That's and that is something that, for example, the Star Trek community are fighting against all the time because they're not allowed, particularly, to make fan films. And if they are, they're very restrictive and very, whereas, because you're still borrowing IP, right, from a business kind of level. It's like I don't own Star Wars, I don't own that logo, I don't own that rights. Anyone could turn around in a heartbeat and take my film down. And every single other fan film ever existed, that's ever been made, because they're like, well, it's not official, but that's never going to happen because George Lucas encourages filmmakers. Funny enough, he always set out to be the anti-studio. Like, he was against the establishment and then almost became the establishment with success. So I think you're obviously talking hypothetically, but he a big supporter of USC and filmmakers and all that kind of thing, and that and I know. I mean, he's probably inspired, and obviously Spielberg. I don't know how many filmmakers and artists kind of working today that owe their lives to those films that they made. And I mean, I know I get emails often from filmmakers or people saying, I saw Origins, it inspired me to make this, and that is very touching, and that's amazing to have made something, and then it touches people, and it creatively it inspires people to do these things, and like that's a very tiny, small percentage of the people that George Lucas and Spielberg have influenced. So amazing, what a legacy! That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and classic comics brings up a question and everything. And I don't know if you know this offhand. Obviously, Mark Hamill gave this very high praise. Do you know if Lucas has seen it? Has he contacted you? Have you heard anything from any of his intermediaries or anything like that? If he has seen it or not?
No, I don't know whether he's personally seen it. I'm not sure. I know there's a bunch of people I'm not allowed to kind of talk about that have seen it, which are pretty amazing. And
that's fair.
Which has been lovely to kind of have some of my heroes kind of watch it and and feedback. That's been pretty cool. Or more than cool. It's been amazing. So who knows? I can imagine him there chuckling away, or thinking, what have you done to my parents? I don't know.
Well,
he will see the spirit of it if he ever sees it.
Well, now here's the question that kind of has been in the back of my mind and everything. Did you do research into his family and everything, and did you deliberately name the two characters after his parents, or was that
definitely.
Okay,
yeah,
so
all right, they are. I mean, they are his parents, right? In my funny little world, that those are his parents, and that's their names, and even the year the film is set is the year of George Lucas's birth. It kind of all tracks, in that way. So that was kind of part of it. I mean, obviously I've cheated because it's like Eleanor and Ellie, and his father is George Walton, Lucas.
George
so
Walter
I've taken,
Lucas.
So I've taken the middle names, as it were, as if that's the affectionate thing they call each other. Maybe he didn't like being called George. He preferred Walt. The same way other people have different names. So I've played the truth a little bit there, but essentially, that's what they're inspired. The names are inspired by.
Yeah. Well, and I will say this: I love the chemistry with the two actors and everything who played his parents and everything, and I very much got I got the sense that this was like, kind of an homage to, Indiana and Marion, from Raiders of the Lost Ark, obviously, but the two actors who played those parts. Honestly, they did it. They did a great. Honestly, I think they did a really great job with their performances. They really they gave me that vibe of when you watch Raiders of the Lost Ark with Indiana and Marion, and you got that same vibe here, yet it was tweaked and everything, but it was tweaked in a way that these were their own characters. They're their own people. They exist in this world, obviously. And I'll say this and everything. I don't know if those two actors have gone on to do other things, but they should be, because I think they did. I think you did a very good job with casting this film, because obviously this is not a huge cast. You've got Ellie and you've got Walt, and of course you've got Akbar, and then you've got the nephew. I can't remember the name of the nephew.
It's called Seth, which is kind of play on Sith. You know, you can kind of see how that might become Sith and Seth. Yeah, that's where he comes from. Sporting an Inquisitor style tattoo.
The one up here.
I saw a few things on the go there. So there's nods everywhere. Yeah.
Yes. Well, let me ask you. Of everything in the Star Wars universe, what was the one big inspiration for doing this film? When everything, what was the biggest influence from Star Wars and from Indiana Jones that made you, or just from the action adventure genre in general, that made you want to put this film together?
I'd say there's probably two things. I think firstly is, we all kind of remember when we first saw it and how it made us feel. And whether we saw A New Hope or whether the sequel trilogy or the prequels, we all know when we watched the first Star Wars. So I remember watching A New Hope, and I didn't grow up in like a sort of privileged kind of background. I grew up, in kind of a single parent family, and like had this aspiration to do something big and become a filmmaker, when be a director, and and so seeing Star Wars and seeing like Luke look up at those the suns and like the whole binary sunset, and think like, and then the journey he goes on was very kind of inspirational for me, very personal. It's like, wow, if this farm boy can do that, then maybe I can do something too, and maybe I'm intellectualizing or reflecting back on it, but I think if I do reflect back, I think that's why it spoke to me. Looking back at it now with a bit of distance, I think that's why it spoke to me. So there's that, but also the main influence was those words that pop up on the start of the film. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Like, people almost don't read those anymore. Like, they don't really. You don't really think about what they mean, because they've become this icon.
Yes.
And I think I mentioned before, I'm like, well, what is he saying? He's saying that this happened, and it happened a long time ago. So this is based on a true story. And so that's always been fun for me, thinking about like, oh, did this happen? Where did this happen? Where are we? Where is Earth as part of this? Are we are we in the unknown regions? Are we, where are we?
Yeah.
It's always fascinated me as a kid, and to making this film. And also just, I love fan films. I try and watch, as many as possible. But some of the early ones are my inspiration, like George Lucas in Love and Troops. These are the originals that like really spun what a fan film could be. It wasn't you just picking up a lightsaber, dressing up as Vader, and hitting things. It's like, oh, you can be clever narratively with the kind of story you tell. And I actually think it's it's important to me to do something which the studios would never do, right? They would never reboot Star Wars Indiana Jones into the same film, right? That would just never happen. Love it or hate it, it just wouldn't happen. Or famous last words if you're watching this in the future, and they have. But I was like, well, if I figured out a way of doing it, so there's the fun, right? That as a fan, you could make something that wouldn't necessarily be made. Whereas now, with Mandalorian and and Boba Fett series and like all these additional Disney Plus series out, they're filling out the gaps in the story, and obviously Rogue One did it, and Solo and all stuff like this. So so try and do something different, because I feel that's what I look for in a fan film. That's what I look for in any film, is something unique and different. I don't want to see the same thing over and over again. I don't want to see the Death Star just bigger and bigger and bigger. I want something. I want to be taking on a journey, on a ride, and that's what we tried to do making this film, and just do something a bit different. Which it's interesting to talk about the title earlier, because originally it was just called Origins. Because it's not just the origins of Star Wars; it's the origins of Indiana Jones, the origins of it's the origins of everything. So it's just called Origins. But I realized just calling it Origins, I think it was my exec producer said, like, you got to call it Star Wars Origins, because nobody will find it. Basically, there's the internet for you. People aren't going to click on it if it's just called Origins. Like, it's got to be called something else. So I'm glad that we added that bit, basically. But yeah, it's technically the origins of a few things.
Yeah. Well, and something that you hit upon and everything just a few minutes ago. For all of us, we remember that moment, regardless of whether we saw it in 77 or 99 or 2015. We were all introduced into this universe at one point or another. And you felt there was a story here to tell. You were inspired by what Lucas and Spielberg had made and everything. You wanted to go back and say, this could be what happened. Maybe in deep in the Sahara Desert in 1944, these two archaeologists or anything that were the parents of George Lucas found all this stuff. Unfortunately, the father disappeared.
Maybe he comes back. We don't know.
Yeah.
There's a sequel.
And honestly, I would love to see a sequel of this. I know this movie was not cheap, and I know that film in itself is not cheap. I mean, if you look at what, I don't know if you're familiar with another channel and everything, Star Wars Theory, the fan film he made and everything, and he's just now, I think, getting into production of part 2. He recently released a trailer and everything. And the thing that you have said numerous times, I agree with. Star Wars is such a broad universe. It doesn't have to be two people bashing lightsabers together. You can tell a different story. And that for me also is something that I've looked for in fan films, is finding something that's different, finding something that's unique. I mean, there are fan films that do that I have enjoyed. There's one and everything that I watched not too long ago called Darth Maul Apprentice. And that was one that I enjoyed very much as well. But Star Wars is a sandbox, and it's a huge sandbox, and you have the opportunity to tell so many different stories in that sandbox. And we've gotten Mandalorian, obviously. We're getting the Book of Boba Fett and everything, and you've got other stories that are going to be coming out that kind of play in this sandbox. And I think if Star Wars is going to grow and continue to be relevant, then people that have vision and have an idea really need to put their ideas out there for the community as a whole to say, yes, we approve of this and we want more of it. I mean, you can tell a heist story like what they did in Rogue One. And but you can still have little winks and nods to the broader universe. I mean, obviously we've gotten that absolutely iconic at this point hallway scene at the end of Rogue One with Vader. But the story itself, if you remove Vader, there's still a story there that people absolutely are connected to. And it didn't have anybody using force powers. It didn't have any of those things. You didn't have a single you had one lightsaber ignite at the end. But it was still a story that people were invested in. And the crazy thing was, and I don't know if you know this or not, but the story was actually written by a guy that worked at Lucasfilm back in the day, John Knoll. He sat down and just wrote this, and then eventually he pitched it to Lucasfilm, to Kennedy and them, and they went off and did it. And I'm glad that this film exists. I'm glad that your film exists now, because you were able to give us all a launching point for, like, this is possibly what Lucas was inspired by stories that were told to him by his mother sitting at the bedside and everything. And it all gives us that inspiration, because, believe it or not, I imagine there are people out there that have seen your film and have said, I love what Phil has done, and I want to do the same now. It's a ripple effect. Lucas dropped a stone in the pond, and it created ripples, and you're just another an echo of that ripple, but you've been able to add your voice to this universe. And that's an incredible thing, because
no, it's just saying. So it's what I think is the delay. Sorry, I think it's wonderful to be embraced. We're on over 1 million views now, and I know there's obviously Darth Maul Apprentice says on like 15, 20 million views, so ridiculous, which is fantastic. There's an audience out there. There's a hunger for this, and to be in the million plus kind of club, if that things that exist, is lovely that it's kind of found its own. I don't know 1 million people. Like I shared it with my mom and a few of my friends, and then you just go, there you go, and you pull it out there and hope that people, it connects to people, it touches people, and people embrace it and share it and talk about it, and and that, as a filmmaker, that's wonderful, right? To make something that engages, inspires, even frustrates people, like that's a valid response. That's absolutely fine. But I just want to correct one thing, Mr. Ambassador, because you said this isn't canon, but I'm under authority that this is actually all truth, and this is actually what George Lucas's parents did do. So I'm just saying now.
Okay. Hey, I'm not. My ego is not so big. My ego is not so big that I can't be corrected. So
I'm only kidding. No, it's fun. I'm just going to edit the Wikipedia page, I think, and see how long it stays there for. No, but it's nice to do something different and that to be embraced, because it might not have been embraced. People might have gone, no, this is too far, this is too much, and I just wasn't interested in making what Star Wars theory is doing, with the Darth Vader fan film series, because, and I get it, he's a fascinating character, and it's obviously very important to him, and that kind of thing. But like, I feel that as a filmmaker, you set yourself up to fail if you don't really nail it, like really nail it. So if in anything, even though I went to the desert and shot this film, it's almost easier because you're creating your own world in a way. Whereas, trying to, and yes, we recreated a very famous set, but from an interesting perspective, that you don't see the pit very often and that kind of thing. So it was a new take on that thing. And of course, there's the iconic ship and the bridge and things we had to recreate.
Yes.
But they're hopefully satisfying enough to tease, but to set a whole film on there, I'd have to build the entire set exactly how it was built back in, the 70s, with the same actors, right? Like, there's no way I could have cast a Luke Skywalker without it being a Mark Hamill. It's just me personally, because you're already saying you're a fan film, by doing that. And what I wanted to do was do something that existed in its own right. And of course, as you say, very smartly, of course, it's sort of supposed to be a bit Indiana Jones. It's supposed to be a bit Marion. It's supposed to be a bit these things. But that's the fun of it, because as you're watching it, you're thinking, is that Marion? Is that Indiana Jones? Is that supposed to be? And then obviously it twists and it takes you on a ride if you're engaged, enough with it. So yeah, and that's not discouraging it. Like, if you want to tell that story, go and tell it. Like, man, one of my very, very, this is what I do for a living, right? I'm a professional director. I've been doing this for 15 years. And some of my first films as a kid, I think I was 14, I made a spoof of the Phantom Menace in my high school with, like, we dressed up in cardboard and became robots and did the whole corridor lightsaber fight with the plastic flip out lightsaber and stuff. So, like, that's what I was doing like 20 years ago, or more. And now I'm a professional filmmaker. So, like, you've got to start somewhere, right? So just do what you love. But what I mean is, like, I had to do something different, at this stage in my career, basically.
Yeah. Well, you wanted to take a risk, and it's a risk that has paid off, obviously. And that is something that I think with anyone that wants to do fan fiction or fan films or anything like that, you have to take risks. You can't play it safe, because if you play it safe, it can get boring. It can get stale. And I think, honestly, that's something that really the entertainment industry needs to get back to. They need to get back to that risk taker attitude, because if you think about it, 2 decades that I absolutely positively love, the 80s and 90s, were, I think, and maybe even going back further than that, a lot of these studios and everything, they took risks on films on unknown properties. And being a creative, you need to have that risk taker attitude. And you did that. You took that risk. You told a story that meant something to you, and obviously has been very well received. And I think, honestly, it is a great thing to see someone who took a risk like yourself and embrace that fact, saying, this is what I want to do. This is a risk that I am going to take. And I'm darned if I do, and I'm darned if I do, and I'm darned if I don't. People are going to like it, or people are going to hate it. It's art. Art is always about taking risk. Life is about taking risks and weighing and measuring the benefit or the detriment that risk can bring you. And obviously, for yourself, being a filmmaker that's been doing this for many, many years, you've taken numerous risks. You took a big risk with this film, but at the same time, it was a risk that I would say has paid off.
Thank you. That's very kind, and it's lovely. Now and again, you just sit and read the comments, and just people. The ones that really touching are the people that, like, I watch this with my daughter and we're both crying right now, or or this, there's a couple of, well, quite a few comments of people saying, wow, like, I had the same feeling as I had when I first watched it in 77. And you're just thinking, like, well, like, you can't set out to make someone feel that, you can't set out, I'm going to make people feel like the way they did when they watched A New Hope for the first time. And that's like, that's a religious experience, right? You can't set out to do that. But the fact that it has touched people in that way is amazing. And the team that made it will all kind of share comments, and stuff, or see how people engage with it, or they sit in rooms and show it when the time we were allowed to sit in rooms together in this strange period of time, show it to their friends, and show it to other people, or see, that kind of thing. And I've seen people watching it on their phones in front of me, like, in a public place, and they have no clue that the person behind them is the person that made it. It's bizarre. I mean, it happened to me once, but it was pretty cool that was so. It was at a Star Wars related event, so there was a connection. It wasn't just someone on the tube, but yeah, it was kind of fun to see it have its own life, and see it kind of out there. And that's all you can ask for, really, is to kind of try and make something that speaks to, moves, inspires,
Yes.
people that watch it.
Yeah. Well, one question I did want to ask you: what would be your hope and everything if you're ever able to get the funding to do a follow up to this? Where would you want to take the story if you want to? I don't know if this has to be a spoiler or anything, but where would you want to see this story go if you're able to continue it?
I want to see like baby George, like little toddler George Lucas, like using the Force on his school kid friends. No, I mean there won't be a sequel. Like I say, there won't. That's very definitive. If someone called me up and said, "Here's a few $1 million, make a fan film," obviously I would do it. And then I'll probably have to think about what that would be, or what that kind of meant. But it was always supposed to be this, because you said it earlier. It's like you can tell too much, right? The film leaves you wondering or putting those pieces together in your head, right? You finish the film and you see Ellie, caring for that child and nurturing it and telling them stories about her father and all this stuff, and you see that in your mind's eye. So why do you need the filmmaker to do that?
True.
Obviously, as a follow-up, I'd love to do something official. I'd love to do a Disney Plus thing or something. That's always before making the film. Like I'd always love to have made something official. Doesn't everyone? Everyone?
Well,
I'll go make tea on a Star Wars set. I'm not precious.
Hey, for something for Star Wars or anything, honestly, because
I mean the opportunities are there now, right? Aren't they?
Yes.
I mean, everyone wants them, and there are people more talented and more experienced than me doing them. But with all the series and Disney Plus and all the Star Wars we're getting, it's an exciting time to be a fan and also be a filmmaker, because it's not as if you're in the twilight years between, the end of the prequel trilogy and nothing else, so it's an exciting time to be a fan, which is why I find it frustrating that there's so much division and moaning. It's like, just take the stars you love and ignore the stars you don't like.
Exactly.
That's how it should be.
Well, just out of curiosity, what are you? Obviously, you're still working. So, what are you currently working on right now and everything? What projects are you involved with and everything? If you can talk about them at all.
Yeah, no, there's two. I can speak in broad strokes, but there's a sci-fi thriller film that I'm currently working on. That's a kind of interesting spin on time travel. So that's so hopefully that might shoot next year now. But COVID is affecting everything and stuff. And then there's potentially something at the end of the year I'm shooting, which is kind of Spielberg-esque in feeling, some kind of family movie that fingers crossed is happening. So I'm lucky enough to be busy, and I direct a lot of television commercials and that kind of thing. So that keeps me busy as well. So I'm working, and there's lots of things that we're working on at the moment, and we just have to kind of crack on and and hope the vaccine kicks in, and hope the world settles a little bit as we kind of adjust going forward. It was sort of, I spent over 3 years making the film, so releasing it just before a pandemic probably wasn't the best timing. But
at the same time, it was, because you had a captive audience.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. And and it came out a week before Rise of Skywalker, so it felt like it was, a little kind of precursor to the end. Like, this is the beginning and that's the end kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it felt like it came out at the right time for fans, for Star Wars. But yeah, we'll see. It's I'm lucky to still be working and still have a job in this crazy time, so I can't complain.
Yeah, same here. I believe me, I understand and everything. But honestly, Phil, this has been I don't know what your time constraints are and everything, but if you want to go ahead and wrap up here, we can and everything. And honestly, I want to say this has truly been a pleasure. It's a rarity for me because obviously I'm a small YouTuber. But to get to sit down and have a conversation like this with someone who has done something of this magnitude, it's truly it's an honor, it's a pleasure and everything to have had you on here. And I love picking the brains of other people who have the passion and vision to go out there and chase what they love, to create what they love. And you created something that I hope genuinely becomes something that's timeless. That's something that people go back to and say, this guy, Phil Hawkins, he created something that was truly creative, and it was just the beginning for him. And I will definitely be following you and everything. And I'll be keeping an eye out for the projects that you've got coming out. And I hope that they, as you say, hopefully the world starts to get back to something that resembles normal. And but in the intervening time, you've done something that gives us that glimpse of hope, because you said it earlier. We both said it. Star Wars, one of the main themes has always been hope. Mm-hmm. And it's something that's very essential to us as human beings. We need to have that idea that things can get better, that there is hope on the horizon. And the end of your film very much speaks to that. I mean, the theme is present throughout the entirety of the film. But at the very end, Ellie's standing there in the middle of the desert by herself with her unborn child and everything at this point. But there is hope that will come from that. Mm-hmm. And you did something that I think obviously has touched a lot of people. It obviously touched me.
Thank you. No, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I mean,
likewise.
Small YouTuber or not, it's like everyone grows, okay? So who knows? And it doesn't. The amount of subscribers doesn't equal how big a Star Wars fan you are, because I know you're a huge fan and obviously an intellectual watcher of Star Wars and your other reviews as well. So, that's really cool. So no, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for having me on. And it's always nice to talk to people that like the film.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, and we'll wrap up here. I have taken my own creative energies and I'm crafting my own fan fiction. It's written. It's not a film, obviously, because I don't have that access or anything. I'm not a filmmaker, never claimed to be, but one thing that I was gifted with was the ability to write. And I'm taking something from the sequels that I didn't care for, and I'm making a story around that to fix what I felt was a flaw. But I can share with you and everything after we're done here and everything. And obviously the rough cut is up on my channel right now and everything. The first 5 episodes of my fan fiction is up on my channel. Yeah. Actually, well, to quote a great character, I'm altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further. I'm altering my own deal.
And that's fair enough, right? But you're doing something creative and positive, and not just being angry at people because they don't agree with you. It's like, actually, this is what I think, and you know what? That's fun and that's very valid, and and that's a very positive way. Look, in a world that doesn't have a lot of positivity at the moment, that's a very positive way of dealing with that, and also seeing how hard it is, right? It's like there's a lot of people that say, oh, well, why didn't that happen? Or maybe this should have happened. Or, and it's like, it's very easy to put that in a YouTube comment, but actually to invest in telling a story and something that works and is cohesive,
Yes.
then that's hard, and that takes a lot of skill. And you may inspire a filmmaker to make your version of it. Who knows?
Hey. Well, to give you the short version, I did not care for. I went when we went and saw Rise of Skywalker. I did not care for the ending where she took the Skywalker last name, because that did not feel earned to me. Mm-hmm. So I said to myself, rather than complain about it, I'm going to go back and write my own story, and I'm essentially fixing that. But along the way, it has kind of grown. I'm fixing Snoke. I'm giving him a backstory that harkens all the way back to the prequel era, and I'm adding my own characters. I've written like 5 or 6 different characters I'm going to be fleshing out and everything. Maybe down the road and everything, I'll go back and tell their stories and everything. And I'm taking something that's just me doing this now, and I'm going to turn this into like a radio drama and everything. I'm gonna be reaching out to people. I'm gonna do like casting calls saying, "Hey, here's my cast list. Pick a character and let's get online and let's do this." I'm gonna reach out. I'm actually gonna reach out to Samuel Kim and everything and say, "Hey, I want to use some of your music because I know you you reached. I don't know if you reached out to him personally or whatever the case was, but you used some of his music for your film, and the guy is a great musician.
He's amazing. We use it for the behind the scenes trailer. The actual film is a new composition, but we use some of his amazing stuff for one of the trailers.
There's another brand I'd love to sit down and pick. I'd love to talk.
Maybe I'd love to talk. Give him a shout. Well, good luck, and it's amazing that you're creating and going to inspire others, and there's other people, actors that are going to get a shot to do some voiceover stuff with you, and it's all great to kind of put that positivity and creativity out there, and it's a great thing to do.
Yes, likewise. Well, Phil, thank you again for your time. Thank you for joining me today. And anytime you want to come back, the door is always open. You are always welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time. And folks, if you haven't already, and I will do this and everything afterwards, I will include the link to the Star Wars Origins channel and everything in the description. Go check out this guy's film. Go check out all the work that they did to make this film. And
if you're interested in I'm trying to slowly but surely make quite a detailed documentary about how I made the film. So maybe put a link to my YouTube channel. There's the Origins YouTube channel, and then there's my YouTube channel that's about directing and advice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there's there's a series there that you can watch about. You can see me going out to Morocco and finding locations and all this kind of stuff. So. If you're interested in the making of it, that's probably cool to check out too.
Send me the link and I will absolutely include it. Everything I'll include it in. So, but folks, thank you for being here today. Phil, again, thank you for your time. Very much appreciated. I will see you all later this afternoon and everything. I'll be back with my Babylon 5 review and everything with the rest of the council. And y'all have a great one. And we'll talk to y'all later. And until next time. This is the Ambassadors, signing off.